what is wrong with Iran. In 1957, 4 years after the United States President went to the UN General Assembly and declared that the countries that have atom bombs must now have a program called Atoms for Peace. So in 1957, the United States government signed an agreement with Iran to transfer fissionable material so that Iran could start a program to create nuclear energy. Finally, in 1967, Iran signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty and went under International Atomic Energy Agency Safeguards Agreement. In 1974, everything was set in place. The Shah of Iran looked eastward and saw that Mrs. Indira Gandhi had gotten away with an explosion of a nuclear weapon. India, which like Israel and Pakistan and North Korea, were outside the Non-Proliferation Treaty, unlike Iran, and therefore were outside International Atomic Energy Agency safeguards, unlike Iran, was getting away with a nuclear weapon. So the Shah of Iran said, I better have a covert program. It turned out, of course, that he ran out of time because something terrible happened to him 3 years later and he was exiled from his country. It's always sad for monarchs to be thrown out of their country. It's good for the United States because the United States then gets their families who set up vast empires and television channels trying to return home. And in Los Angeles, in fact, there's a vast network of people who want the Shah's descendants to return to Tehran, which is even greater fantasy than the people who wanted Zahir Shah to stop playing chess in Rome and come back as the king of Afghanistan. You know, amazing ideas that people sometimes have of bringing monarchs back after the people have overthrown them. But in Iran, there was no open nuclear program. They developed a program towards peaceful nuclear under the NPT and under the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency. In other words, they had, through Eisenhower's project of Weapons for Peace, Atoms for Peace, they had a right to develop nuclear energy. Let's leave that aside for a moment. South Asia has a very old relationship to Iran, to Central Asia. I mean, I remember that vividly because my grandfather would sit up late at night and translate books from Farsi into English. That was one of his side jobs for the Asiatic Society of India, based in Calcutta, in Bengal. We have a very old relationship with Iran. Some of us know that because there is so much Iranian culture inside India, inside Pakistan. In the 1990s, when India felt that there was a major need to increase energy sources, you know, the problem of a booming economy, fine, it booms for only a few people, but nonetheless it was booming. The problem for a booming economy is it needs vast amounts of energy. And India's domestic energy, like China, is of course coal, which only in the United States will they try to convince you can be clean coal. Coal is always dirty, like your tar sands oil. However much people say, okay, fine, okay, fine, we won't get into that. It's too touchy for your own economy. But coal is a nightmare for India. So India was very interested in getting more gas from the neighbors, Central Asia and from Iran. Because Iran produces a vast amount of natural gas. Some of it comes out of Ahmadinejad's mouth, but let's set that aside also for now. Vast amount of natural gas is produced in Iran. It's okay, yeah, once in a while you can make vast amount of gas. Secondly, in the 1990s, there was a great interest in tying the economies of India and Pakistan closer. There were some moves made in that direction. Various strategic planners were saying that's the way to build so-called confidence for peace. That we need to link these countries together. So the idea was an Iranian pipeline was going to come from Iran through, in those days the feeling was in the Pakistani elite that once the Taliban comes to power in Kabul, it will be safe to run the pipeline through Kandahar into Balochistan and out into India, through Sindh, out into India. That was the idea. It was called the peace pipeline. It was the pipeline of peace. And it was a very important idea. It was taken seriously by all major political thinkers, including the ruling elite. Why? Not because they believe in peace like we believe in peace. Not because they are idealists and utopians like us, proudly. We are proudly idealists. Nothing wrong with ideals. Without ideals, we'd end up no longer being human. Aadmi tha badi mushkil se insaan hua. Right? There's nothing wrong with being... They are not idealists. They are simply about pragmatism and money. And they understood that if you need energy, coal is not going to cut it. For pragmatic reasons, you bring the gas from Iran. Now comes the problem. After 9/11, the United States government, at the time led by a man that one does uncharacteristically miss at the top of the tree, George W. Bush, who articulated the view via his team that Iran was a problem. Now, I want you to understand something, that Benjamin Netanyahu, when he was a member of the Knesset, in 1992 gave a speech saying Iran is 3 years away from making a nuclear weapon. We are now at 2012, and I just saw him do his Mickey Mouse cartoon act at the UN General Assembly with the drawing of a bum and a red marker. He was basically saying, I know how to draw a line. Look, and in fact, as somebody at the Daily Beast put it, he made a mistake. He drew the line above the 90%. That means that Iran can actually enrich to above 90% weapons grade, and then we'll stop them. He was meant to do it below. He was not properly briefed. It's okay. He had his marker. Chalo, that's okay. But in 92, he said they're going to have a bomb. This is a long-standing issue. And we don't have time to get into that. The role Iran plays in the Middle East. Why the Saudis don't like it. We don't have time to go into all that. Huh? We would wish we could get into, but there's no time for that. That's another very interesting story. Let that be. In the early 2000s, Condoleezza Rice makes an opening to the Indian government. Then the Indian government was led by the BJP, Bharatiya Janata Party. Nothing Janta about the Bharatiya Party, but still, it's called the Bharatiya Janata Party. We generally like to think of it as something quite different than the Bharatiya Janata Party, but they were in power. They were quite receptive to what the Rice and what the Bush administration was saying. What they were saying was the following. We are going to make you a deal. We don't think you should have a relationship with Iran. We are going to give you nuclear power. Nuclear power is better for India because it's more modern. Modern, advanced countries who are players in the UN Security Council, the P5 members, are recognized nuclear powers. If you want to be a player, you have nuclear. Or as George W. Bush used to say, nuclear. If you have nuclear, you win. Natural gas, no good. Okay? That was the basic line. And India decided, to my great shame, to go along with the Bush line on this. Now, why is this a problem? Remember, India is not a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. India is not under international atomic energy safeguards. And yet, the United States in 2005 and 2006 signed the US-India Civil Nuclear Agreement.